Good morning, sixth graders. Happy Wednesday. You have already seen this screen, but I do just want to give you a reminder that you're not going to be able, you're probably not going to be able to finish everything that we're doing today during our class time. So whatever you don't get finished is meant to be done in that independent work time. And that's kind of Boy the Painted Cave, but whatever works for you. So we're going to go ahead and get started because I have a lot to talk about today. Today's book talk is Holes by Louis Satcher. This is an amazing book. You might have read it before. You might have seen the movie, but it's kind of, it's realistic fiction because everything could happen, even though it's a little bit far-fetched. But it's a kid who does something, but he's not a bad kid. He does something kind of bad. He gets sent to a boys' camp. Kind of sounds like Scar Island. Definitely not as sinister, but there is, even though this book is funny and kind of silly at times, there is kind of a dark side and some people up to no good and things like that. So this is just a really creative book. If you like books that are just like not like the usual run-of-the-mill books, they're a little bit different. They're written really well. This is a great book for you. So I highly recommend it. I loved it. It's a great book. Okay, today we are on Wednesday. So we're going to read a new story in your benchmark book and learn a new technique about narrative stories. So we'll get to that in a second. It's called the IRR. Then we will also, after social studies time, we will go to, we'll read chapter 2 of Boy the Painted Cave. I will read it. If you want to listen to me read and follow along, you can do that. Otherwise, you can read it on your own too. Okay, and then after that, you'll go into Otis, do the chapter 2 questions. Remember, do not submit them. Do not turn them in. You won't do that until Friday. All right, so our new story we are reading today is called My Superpowers by Dan Greenberg. So, Okay, this is a slideshow. I don't know where I put it though. Oh my goodness. Okay. Hold on. Okay, so here's the slideshow for that. That was not as hard as I thought, but I thought I had it all ready to go. All right, so My Superpowers by Dan Greenberg. So this is a personal narrative, and you've learned before, you probably already know, a personal narrative is a story that's about you usually. Okay, so it's a story that you're telling about something that happened in your life. So a personal narrative can be defined as a first person point of view, and the first person is where you say I and me and things like that in the story. Autobiographical story, it's your story. Personal narratives usually include a significant incident, the writer's response to the incident, and a reflection of the meaning of the incident. So keywords to think about. A personal narrative is a story based on one's own life and told in the first person. Point of view is the perspective from which the story or poem is told. First person point of view is where the narrator is a character in the story using first person pronouns such as I and we and me to tell what he or she sees and knows. Okay, so that's first person point of view. The other common point of view is third person point of view. And that's where the narrator is someone outside of the story using third person pronouns such as he, she, and they to tell the story. Okay, so that's when the story's being told, but not from like the main character's perspective. So the IRR is a device that's often used in personal narratives. There's an incident, the cause. That's the central piece of action that is the focus of the narrative. It may include the setting and dialogue. The response is the effect, the immediate emotions and actions associated with the incident. And then there's a reflection, a description that explores the significance of the incident. So maybe that could be like a lesson learned, something like that. Okay, so a example from an IRR. When I was younger, my grandmother told me not to play in the front yard because they were building a fence and there was wood and tools all over the grass. Okay, so that's the story. That's the beginning. I didn't listen to my grandmother and played in the front yard anyway. I tried to balance on a piece of wood and didn't notice a nail sticking out. I stepped on the nail, sorry for the typo, which went through the bottom of my foot. I ended up needing to go to the hospital because the nail I stepped on was rusty, which could have been dangerous. I learned that I need to listen to my elders. My grandmother was much older and wiser than me. I should have listened to her instead of ignoring her advice. Okay, now as we listen to the story, see if you can find the IRR. Put a star next to the incident, circle the reaction, and underline the reflection. And if you cannot remember all of those things, don't worry about it. Okay, and actually, I'm going to rewind a little bit. We're going to read the story today and tomorrow. Today, we're just going to read the story. Don't worry about the IRR. Don't worry about writing anything right now. But when we go tomorrow, we'll be looking more closely for the IRR. Okay, but you can still have it in the back of your mind. Okay, so this story is on page 15 in your Springboard textbook. So go ahead and turn there. If you need a moment, you can always push pause on me. That's the beauty of watching a video. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. My Superpowers by Dan Greenberg. Do you ever wish you had superpowers? When I was a kid, growing up on the north side of Chicago and being picked on by bullies, I prayed for superpowers. Like Superman, I wanted to be able to fly faster than a speeding bullet, to be more powerful than locomotives, to leap tall buildings in a single bound. Mainly, I wanted to punch bullies in the stomach so hard that my fists came out their backs. Winters in Chicago are so cold that frost forms leafy patterns on your bedroom window and stays there for months. The wind howls off Lake Michigan, and a thick shell of pitted black ice covers the street and sidewalks from December to April. To keep warm in winter, I wore a heavy wool coat, a wool muffler, wool mittens, furry earmuffs, and one of my most treasured possessions, a Chicago Cubs baseball cap autographed by a player named Big Bill Nicholson. On the coldest days of winters, 3 bullies waited for me after school, just for the fun of terrorizing me. The biggest one was a fat, ugly kid named Vernon Manteuffel. Vernon and his 2 big buddies would pull off my Cubs cap and tease me with it. They'd pretend to give it back, then toss it around in a game of keep away. One day in February, when the temperature was so low I could feel my eyeballs cracking, Vernon and his friends caught up with me on my way home. As usual, they tore off my Cubs hat and started playing catch with it. What made it worse than usual was that on this particular day, I happened to be walking with a pretty girl named Ann Cohn, who lived across the street from me. Ann Cohn had green eyes and shiny black hair, and I had a goofy crush on her. As if it wasn't bad enough that these guys humiliated me when I was alone, now they were doing it in front of Ann Cohn. I was so embarrassed, I began to cry. Crying in front of Ann Cohn made me even more embarrassed. I was speechless with shame and anger. Driven by rage, I did what only an insane person would do. I attacked Vernon Manteuffel. I punched him in the chest, and I grabbed my Cubs cap. Vernon saw that I had become a madman. People don't know what to do with madmen. Vernon looked shocked and even a little afraid. He backed away from me. I attacked the second boy, who also backed away from me. Encouraged by their backing away, I ran after them, screaming, punching, flailing at them with both fists. I chased them for 2 blocks before they finally pulled ahead and disappeared. Breathing hard, tears streaming down my face, I felt I had regained my honor, at least temporarily. That weekend, perhaps made braver by my triumph over the 3 bullies, I kissed Ann Cohn on her sofa. I can't tell you exactly why I did that. Maybe because it was a cold, cloudy Saturday and there was nothing else to do. Maybe because we both wondered what it would feel like. In any case, I could now brag that at age 8, I had personally kissed an actual girl who wasn't related to me. I never did get those superpowers, not as a kid at least. When I grew up, I became a writer. I discovered a particular pleasure in going on risky adventures. I wrote about my real-life adventures for national magazines. I spent 4 months writing with New York firefighters and running into burning buildings with them. I spent 6 months writing with the New York homicide cops as they chased and captured drug dealers and murderers. I flew upside down over the Pacific Ocean with a stunt pilot in an open cockpit airplane. I took part in dangerous voodoo ceremonies in Haiti. I spent time on a tiger ranch in Texas and learned to tame 200-pound tigers by yelling no and smacking them hard on the nose. I found that tigers were not much different from the bullies of my childhood in Chicago. I also wrote fiction. I created entire worlds and filled them with people I wanted to put there. I made these people do and say whatever it pleased me to have them do and say. In the worlds I made up, I was all-powerful. I had superpowers. I began writing a series of children's books called the Zach Files, about a boy named Zach who kept stumbling into the supernatural. In many of these books, I gave Zach temporary powers: to read minds, to travel outside his body, to travel back in the past, to triumph over ghosts and monsters. I created another series called Maximum Boy, about a boy named Max who accidentally touches radioactive rocks that just came back from outer space and who suddenly develops superpowers. Maximum Boy is me as a kid in Chicago, but with superpowers. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. In the Zach Files, I created a fat, stupid kid who sweats a lot and thinks he's cool, but everyone laughs at him behind his back. You want to know what I named this fool? Vernon Manteuffel. I do hope the real Vernon knows. Okay, so that was a really great story. I like that story a lot. Hopefully you did too. We are going to read it tomorrow and then talk more about finding the IRR. So just keep that in mind. Okay, let's go ahead and go back to our slideshow for today. Okay, you guys, we just finished Superpowers. You can go ahead and push pause on this video if you want. Get a drink of water, stretch, and then we are going to go ahead and go into social studies. Okay, so that's that. So push pause on me. I'm going to take a drink of my coffee, then I'm going right into social studies. So, okay, so today we are going to finish our slideshow in class, and then we are going to, you're going to read in your textbook and look for information about adaptations. So I will get to that in a second after the slideshow. So let's go ahead and dive into the slideshow. So we're talking about the first human still. And let me see what slide we left off on. 9. All right, so now we're continuing to talk about the slides. There were many hominid species. One survived, all others went extinct. So our group right here obviously is not extinct. This is the hominin group, genus Homo, okay, for Homo sapien. An example genus, feline, has lions, tigers, cheetahs, and etc. Why are we still here? Homo sapiens, us, are the sole survivors. There is a video here that if you want to watch this on your own, you can. So this will be in the slide deck. You won't be able to access it from my video, but you will in the slide deck. So yeah. Okay. Our ancestors were able to survive because they did 2 things. They adapted to and controlled their environment. So some examples. And so when you look at your textbook today and read through your textbook, page 10 is a big deal in the textbook. Okay, that tells a lot about what what our ancestors did. They lived on the ground. They walked upright. Their brain got bigger. They got more effective like their hands became more effective. They used tools. They used fire. They made clothing, and they made shelter. All of these things are ways that our ancestors adapted to make our species live on. Okay, and a tool, and remember, on our assessment on Friday, we're really going to be paying attention to vocabulary as well as adaptation. So a tool, we all know what a tool is, but when we think about it in terms of history, we think of it as an object that has been modified to help a person accomplish a task. Okay, and then during the Paleolithic era, stone tools were made mostly to hunt and gather food. Okay, and then if you want to know more about what they ate, there is another video here that you can watch from the slideshow in the weekly planner. Okay, some other vocabulary words. A transformation is a major change. Okay, and that does not necessarily just in social studies, but in general. Migration is to move from one place to another. So people have always migrated. Okay, and this is showing some of the ways that people migrated. So yeah, they migrated all over here, down here. This is South America, North America. Over here is Europe, Africa. Okay. So yeah, the ability of Homo sapiens to think and understand reached a new level along with their ability to learn and remember. They developed the ability to imagine and plan. They became a group that could act as one. This is a major improvement over other earlier human species. They work together. That's what they're saying. Okay, so we don't have this option right now, but turn to your seat buddy and discuss. Humans don't need to be the fastest or toughest or smartest to survive anymore. Why not? Okay, so that's something to think about. Okay, now one of the very first, I believe it was the very first human skeleton, they named her Lucy. So this is a video. They have just found her and pretty recently, like not super recently, but definitely the last few dozen years. I don't remember exactly when it was. I do remember learning about her when I was a kid, so sometime in the last 100 years, okay? Not that I'm 100, but you know what I'm saying. All right, so this is extra information if you're interested to learn more about human origins, okay? So there's a couple of videos here and stuff like that. So those are extras if you are interested. What is not extra, and I should have grabbed Luke's book so I could show you in your book, but you're going to read in your textbook pages 4 through 12. Okay, and I'm going to go back to my slideshow. Okay. Okay, so we're going to read, 9 through 15? Sorry, that is actually 4 through 12. Mix that up with something else. Okay, 4 through 12 in your textbook. As you read, you are going to highlight the important parts, examples of adaptation. So what you're really looking for are examples of adaptation. And when I say annotate, that is to make notes in the text, make a little star by something that's super important, things like that. Annotating is kind of like having a conversation with whatever it is you're reading. And your books are awesome because they are just for you. They're called consumables, and you can use them however you wish, okay? So you can write in them, you can highlight them, you can make notes in them. But again, you need to be reading pages 4 through 12 in your textbook. And I'm going to go back up here to the essential question. The essential question today is how our human ancestors have adapted or changed to survive in their environment. So you might want to write that on a Post-it or something and have it next to you while you read your social studies book, because that is the information that you are looking for. Okay, and that's from the slideshow, but I did take it out just so we could really focus on it. All right, so that is what you're doing for social studies. Go ahead and do your social studies now. I am going to just continue with this video and read you chapter 2 of Boy in the Painted Cave. If you want to read it on your own, you can just not even watch the rest of this video. If you do want to read with me as I read, then you can push pause and come back to this after school, because I don't think you're going to have time to do social studies and language arts before third period. Okay, so go ahead and push pause on me. I'm going to go down to this. Here is the PDF for Boy of the Painted Cave. If you do not have a book, you just click on this link and you'll be able to read it there. Reading it in book form, I do recommend, though, to give your eyes a break from the screen. Okay, so Boy of the Painted Cave, chapter 2. Okay, and basically Tao just got kicked out of his tribe because he forgot to bring a rabbit home, which is really important back then because they need food desperately, and he just left a perfectly good rabbit out in the meadow. So they said, don't come back until you have a rabbit. And the rabbit's now been stolen, so he needs to find a new rabbit. Chapter 2. Tao propped his torch against a stone, then gathered armfuls of brushwood and kindling and piled them up near the sandy embankment. He set them afire and threw on more sticks and logs until the yellow tongues of flame lit high into the darkness. Except for a few grubs and a handful of dried berries, he had not eaten since early morning, and he felt a dull emptiness in his stomach. Holding his torch high, he searched about under a group of oak trees, looking for acorns. But it was late in the season, and the ground had already been picked over by marmots and pigs. Just then, the gliding shadow of a flying squirrel swooped down from an old dead willow at the top of the embankment. Tao looked up and saw a hole in the scarred white trunk, and he knew where he might find a meal. Broken limbs jutted out from the old tree, and it was an easy climb. Tao reached into the hole, his fingers groping through the warm nest of leaves and fluff. He brought out a handful of acorns. Back on the ground, he sat on his heels and cracked them open with a handy stone and picked out the bits of meat with his fingertips. The acorns were dry and tasteless, but they helped to take the edge off his hunger. Next, he gathered a bunch of dried meadow grass and spread them out on the sand to make a bed. With the embankment at his back and the warm fire in front, he felt safe from the hyenas and prowling leopards. The night air was cool and still. He lay back on his bed of straw, feeling the prickly stems against his back and smelling the sweet odor of new grass. Except for the short, coughing roar of a cave lion far out in the valley and the hiss and sputter of the fire, the night was quiet. For a long while, he lay awake, thinking about his quarrel with Volt and the others over the missing rabbit. The punishment did not bother him, for he had been out alone in the bush many times before, and he was not afraid. At times like this, he often thought of his mother, whom he had never seen, and he wondered what she was like. He closed his eyes and saw a picture of a young girl with hair the color of honey and a round, smiling face. He reached out as if to touch her, then withdrew his hand. It was only a vision. He wished he could draw her as he imagined her to be, but this would be taboo. Mostly, it was against the laws of the clan to make an image of a person. It would offend the evil spirits. Tao shook his head as he huddled down in the loose straw. Why are all these things bad, he wondered. Why is it wrong to draw in the sand, to make a picture on stone, to be born with a lame foot? Is there nothing good, nothing right? Is this why Volt is always angry? Everything he sees is bad. Kala says she has never seen an evil spirit. If they are real, where do they stay? Where do they hide? If in the forest, behind the mountains and boulders? Just then, Tao heard a movement in the tall grass. He jumped up quickly and pulled a flaming torch from the fire. As he looked into the darkness, he saw only the moving shadows of the stunted willows. Then, just outside of the glare of his torch, he made out a pair of gleaming eyes. Tao froze and gripped his spear tighter. It could be a prowling cave lion or a leopard. If it was bold enough to come within the light of the fire, he would have little chance. He watched cautiously, waiting for the beast to show itself. Slowly he lifted his spear, ready to throw as the yellow eyes came closer. Then he stopped. Fear left him as he made out the thin gray shape of the little wolf. The animal cringed and crept up through the grass. Little by little, it came into the light of the fire, whining softly. Tao leaned down, clicking his tongue. The animal seemed to be begging for help. He had heard about wolf dogs before, that sometimes during bad seasons when they are hungry and half starved, they hang around the camps looking for a bone or a scrap of meat, or to lick at the hearth rocks where the fat drips. This one was young and thin as a shadow. If it didn't find something to eat soon, it would die. Tao squatted down, talking to the animal softly. You came back when I have nothing to give you. No food, no meat. The wolf remained silent, watching Tao intently. You must learn to hunt on your own, said Tao, creeping closer, but still not touching the animal. There is food in the fields and in the woods, voles and mice under the grass, ground squirrels in the meadow. You must sniff them out and catch them. The sound of Tao's voice seemed to quiet the animal. It whimpered softly and began to creep up on its belly until its coal-black nose was only an arm's length away. Tao reached out to touch the soft muzzle, but the animal pulled back and bared its fangs. The boy tried again. Once again, the young wolf shied away. It would not allow itself to be touched. Tao sat still, watching as the animal edged closer. The wolf dog's ears were laid back. Its ribs showed through the ragged gray fur. Tao saw the hunger in the yellow eyes. He saw it in the lean face and in the pale tongue that darted out to lick the thin lips. Then, in the flickering light of the fire, Tao saw something else. Something glistening white sticking out of the wolf's mouth. It was not a fang, not a flash of white tooth, but a long sliver of bone jammed deeply into its upper jaw. Now Tao understood why the animal refused to eat, why it was so weak and thin. Somehow, in fighting for its food and pulling or tugging on a piece of meat, a splinter of bone had become lodged in its jaw. Now it could not be fed. It could not even hunt. Tao crept closer, inching nearer and nearer, reaching out slowly, his hand almost touching the wolf's muzzle. The little animal did not move. Its yellow eyes caught the firelight, and again its lips pulled back in a low snarl. Tao waited, his heart beating fast. Then, with a sudden lunge, he sprang forward and grasped the wolf's head with one hand and the splinter of bone between the fingers of his other hand. The little animal jumped back, yelping and crying, but Tao hung on. Boy and wolf twisted and turned, tumbling across the sandbank. The wolf shook his head violently, opening and closing his jaws, trying to escape. Still, Tao held on tight, floundering across the sand as the wolf continued to yelp and thrash about. Suddenly, the sliver of bone came loose in Tao's fingers. The wolf was free. He ran about the circle, whining, rubbing his bloody muzzle in the damp earth. Be quiet, said the boy. He held up the long splinter of bone, blood-smeared, glistening red in the firelight. Your demon pain is gone. Now you can eat again. The wolf dog picked himself up, weaving back and forth on unsteady legs. For a long moment, he stared at Tao, his yellow slitted eyes shining, his pink tongue licking at the bleeding wound. Go, said Tao. Go back to your pack and hunt with your friends. You will soon grow strong again. The little wolf hesitated. Tao saw it look back once or twice, then with a soft rustling of grass as the animal disappeared into the night. Tao smiled, but after the wolf dog was gone, he felt a sense of emptiness. He was alone again. He got up and threw more dried willow branches and a log of birchwood on the fire, enough to last through most of the night. Then he lay down again. He heard the whooping laughter of the hyenas far out on the grassland, and he knew they were hungry too. His hand reached out, and his fingers closed around the spear lying beside him. He was tired, and there was a weariness in his bones, and he fell asleep quickly. As he slept, Tao drifted off into a narrow tunnel that led into a large cave. On the floor were shells and hollow stones filled with black, yellow, and red paint. The walls were smooth and unmarked, waiting for the hand of the painter. Tao picked up the red shell and dipped his finger in the oily color. With wild sweeps of his hand, he began to paint. His arm moved beyond his control as if it had a mind of its own. Slowly, a bounding red deer took shape, its antlers thrown back, its nostrils flaring as it ran. It leaped over the ground, fear and panic showing in its eyes. Tao put down the red shell and picked up the black one. Once more, he dipped his fingers in the paint and began to draw. This time, a huge black wolf came forth, racing after the deer. With bounding leaps, it gave chase. Great ruffles of fur stood out around its head and neck and shoulders, and a long waving tail flew out behind it. Finally, Tao picked up the shell containing the yellow paint. He dabbed it on the wall, and suddenly the wolf stared out at him with golden eyes. Tao went on drawing and painting, covering the walls with herds of bison and mammoths, horses, and aurochs. I don't know what that is. I'll have to look that up. When he awoke, the sun was coming over the horizon. The fire was a gray heap of smoldering embers, and the shrill kee-kee-kee of a kestrel came from the branches of the dead willow tree. He rubbed his eyes and glanced around, and he knew he had been dreaming. He stood up and looked out across the grasslands. The valley was bathed in a golden glow of color. The mountains in the distance were morning green. Here and there, small patches of snow marked the last footprints of fading winter. Behind him was the long ridge of limestone cliffs, and on top of that were the flatlands of the high plains. He felt the pangs of early morning hunger, and he started out across the valley through the knee-high grass. He stopped frequently to turn over stones and pull up sod in search of ants and grubs. He was used to going long hours without eating, but now he had gone almost 2 days without food, and he was growing weak. He found a few white grubs and plopped them into his mouth, swallowing them whole. He knew they would taste better roasted, but he could not wait. Even this was not enough. He would have to find something more. And he knew that if he wanted to go back to camp, he would have to catch another rabbit. Once through the grassland, he made his way along the edge of the swamp until he came to a thicket of alders and briar bushes. It was dense and tangled with creepers and thorns. He had never been past this place, but beyond, he knew, lay a dark marshland of winding creeks and green forests. The clan people called it the slough. I believe that's how you pronounce it, even though that is not what it looks like at all. The elders said it was peopled by demons. The hunters never went there, and the women would not dig its roots or harvest its berries, lest they become cursed by evil spirits. Tao stood on the edge of this forsaken place and thought of the game and food that might lay within it. For a moment, the threat of taboo held him back. He limped slowly along the edge, undecided, trying to see beyond the tangle of vines and branches. Then through the thicket, he heard the grunt of a sow and the answering squeal of piglets. He forgot about demons and evil spirits and pushed his way through the thick briars. Heedless of the thorns that scratched his arms and caught at his deerskin leggings, he plunged deeper. Soon the earth became soft and black, and he smelled the musty dampness of the sluggish creeks and heard the rattling call of the kingfishers. The dank woodland was dark and green, with shafts of sunlight filtering through the bare branches and of the old hornbeams and willows. Tao stopped and glanced around, wondering if the hand of an evil spirit would strike him. But nothing happened. The place looked no more evil or dangerous than many places he had seen before. Gripping his spear tighter, he went deeper. He came to a shallow stream covered with rafts of new watercress. He scooped up some in his fingers and smelled its freshness. He chewed some and found it crisp and sweet. Oyster mushrooms grew in thick clusters on the trunks of dead birch trees, and berry bushes formed dense thickets between the scrub. The mushrooms were shriveled now, and the berries were sparse and dry, but he marked the spot in his mind. By late spring, the mushrooms would be lush, and the berries would be ripe for picking. In another stream, he found a bed of freshwater mussels. He lay on his stomach and reached into the icy water and picked some of them out with the mud. With his flint knife, he pried them open and ate the soft pink flesh. He was still hungry, but he felt better now, and a new lightness welled up within him. Here was food in abundance. He leaned down and tried to catch a lazy suckerfish that was swimming along the muddy bottom of the stream almost within his grasp. Suddenly, a hideous shriek echoed through the marshland. Wah, woo, wee, woo, wah, woo, it went, sending it icy chills racing up Tao's spine. It came from the far side of the creek. Tao jumped up quickly and stood in frozen silence. He looked across the stream to the clump of dark cedars from where the awful scream had come. If he had never seen an evil spirit before, he thought he was about to see one now. All right. Whoops. Okay, so now you are going to go to Otis and answer the chapter 2 questions in Otis at this time. That is it for Wednesday. I know there's a lot today. Answering these questions is the only real work you have besides reading. We read my Superpowers. You're going to read in your social studies textbook. And then we read The Boy in the Painted Cave. So lots of reading today, friends. You did a great job. Relax. We're already halfway to the weekend, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I will see you tomorrow.